Good evening, everyone. Good evening. We are going to go ahead and get started here. All right, thank you so very much. My name is Lori Treader. I'm Bowling Green's Municipal Administrator, and we'd like to thank you for attending tonight's meeting and participating in this public session on the proposed zoning code. In structuring tonight's forum, members of council ask that the evening be arranged to allow opportunities for those in attendance to share perspectives, engage with council members, and ask questions. Additionally, members of council want to continue listening to the feedback on the zoning code. So, to try to accomplish these goals with the size of this crowd while also being respectful of your time, the evening has been structured as follows. We will be starting with presentations reviewing the current pedestrian residential area, the proposed central residential district, and a proposal with additional changes to the pedestrian residential and creating a new zone. We are aiming for each of these presenters to talk for 5 to 7 minutes. Following that, we will have small group discussions at the table. So thank you all for spreading out around the room. We know that some of the tables are tight, but we are trying to just have different areas for discussion so that everyone can participate in the dialogue. And we have a member of council at each of your tables. We will talk for about 15 minutes. And then we are asking that at your table, you assign a secretary to take notes and then a presenter who at the end of that 15 minutes will come forward and share your report out with the entire group. So also, all in attendance, as you came in, you were provided with an index card, and we also have additional index cards on the table. We ask that should you have questions about the proposals you're hearing or any other area of the zoning code, that you write them on the card. After we have our small group discussions and the report out, staff will collect those cards and we are going to take a break at that point. The goal in using this index card system is that we'll be able to group like questions together as much as possible and then respond to them, and that will help with the interest of time and flow of the meeting this evening. So while you're on break, the staff will work hard to consolidate those questions. We'll invite our members of council and our staff up front to address those questions. Couple quick notes. We do have various materials on your tables, maps. We have the proposed zoning code there. We don't necessarily have enough copies of all of the things for everyone because we do have a QR code that is on your agenda should you be able to look online. We try to be sustainable in not having copies for everything, so we do ask that you share. And we will try to provide you with something additional that you need. The staff is over here and glad to help. We also want to note that because this session is being live streamed, we do respectfully ask that everyone speaking during the open session come and use a microphone to do so. The live stream, as a note, if you're listening at home and you are watching the live stream, we are going to be muting you during the table discussions. And again, we will ask those giving the report outs at the end of the discussions to come up here to do the reporting so that it can be streamed. So again, we really appreciate your attendance here this evening and your willingness to talk and engage in dialogue. I'm going to ask our three speakers to go ahead and make their way up here. If you could, please, we'll have you over here and we will go ahead and get started. Thanks so much. Yeah, why don't you three here, John, and
Just use these mics?
that's up to you. If you would rather stand, it'd probably be easier for folks if you're standing to see you while
Okay.
you're presenting, if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, yeah, I was just having you all up here.
That's a joke.
Oh, okay. So then, okay. All right, ready?
Yeah,
All right,
so-
thanks, guys.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name's Rachel Phipps. I'm your third ward council person. I'm going to start by going through the pedestrian residential district as proposed in the most recent draft of our zoning code. Next, John Sampin will present the citizen proposed central residential district plan. And then Jeff Dennis will present a more recent proposal to scale back the commercial uses originally proposed for the PR district and add residential uses to some or all of the existing spots of commercial zoning within the neighborhoods at issue. So their handouts, as Lori said, on each of the three proposals on the table. The bulk of the discussion tonight is going to be about the zoning for the neighborhoods that surround our downtown. but the city is in the process of updating our entire zoning code, which was originally passed nearly 50 years ago. This citywide zoning code update began several years ago and is an attempt to put points from various community planning documents into action. The city administration worked with ZoneCo, a firm of zoning professionals, to create the new code using the 2014 Future Land Use Plan, the 2018 Community Action Plan, and our 2019 East Worcester Development Plan as guideposts. Our zoning code is a critical part of putting the vision and plans of these documents into action. But admittedly, these planning documents do not include the level of detail that regulations and standards in a zoning code provide. We are here this evening to get into those details. So our planning documents, big picture, call for mixed use opportunities in the neighborhoods adjacent to downtown and for more diverse housing options in these neighborhoods and also citywide. With that direction, ZoneCo proposed the pedestrian residential district, which is tan on the map on your table and up here. Within the PR donut, there are spots of light pink, which represent pockets of industrial and commercial zoning in our current code and on the ground right now. So ZoneCo proposed zoning all of these spots of light pink, commercial in the new code. So the PR district, that tan donut, was the subject of a lot of Planning Commission's discussion of the new zoning code when it held a series of meetings last summer on this topic. The PR district was also a focus for council when we held a series of working sessions on the zoning code in the fall. Changes were made to the district in response to citizen questions and concerns in the most recent draft, which is dated February 2023. So now details on the proposed PR district. If you take a look at the comparison chart that's floating somewhere around the tables, and it's definitely at the QR code, the city's website, the comparison chart, with the mayor's office header, you can see an easy comparison of the proposed PR district versus the citizen proposal that John will share and the most recent proposal that Jeff will present. The pedestrian residential district as proposed in the most recent draft is the first white column from the left. So in the most recent draft, both 1 and 2 unit dwellings would be permitted in the pedestrian residential district, and accessory dwelling units would be conditionally allowed if specific requirements were met, including that the property owner live in the principal residence or in the ADU. A handful of limited businesses would be able to locate in this PR donut by right as well. Those are Barber Beauty Spa, a bed and breakfast, corner store, funeral home, professional office, and daycare center. Several additional businesses could locate in the district conditionally, including microbrewery distillery, nursing home, home daycare, retail sales and services, bar or tavern or place of worship. So these businesses were selected because many exist nearby or in residential neighborhoods right now, and many tend to be service-oriented and lower traffic. So the list of uses is limited. In contrast, the commercial zone in our new code allows 41 or so uses. So the code also treats permitted and conditional uses very differently. The planning director is required to review any conditional use application, and there are a number of factors in the code that the director must review where the uses are conditional, and as well, as specific conditions the planning director may impose, including setbacks, buffers, hours of operation, noise transmission, height limits, and parking provisions. So the draft code also places various regulations on the limited types of small businesses allowed in the district to make sure that those businesses are right-sized for the neighborhoods. Those regulations include a maximum building height of 35 feet, which is much lower than the 45 feet, 60 feet, and up found in other zones and districts. Businesses that locate in these neighborhoods would not be able to build large parking lots. They are permitted only one rear or side yard parking pad, which would accommodate about 3 to 5 cars. And specific businesses, may have further limits. For example, the corner store may not exceed 1,000 square feet. So the result of all of these regulations should be smaller operations with lower traffic. Importantly, the PR district is not an attempt to expand our downtown. It's an attempt to expand opportunities for local entrepreneurs and new businesses, often new businesses with little available capital, while adding amenities in the form of walkable destinations for residents in these neighborhoods, all in line with those big picture goals of our planning documents. So there are two primary parts to each zone or district in our zoning code. The uses allowed and the lot standards. I just outlined, the uses allowed in the proposed PR district. Another goal of this code update process was to move the lot standards in the district closer to the existing built environment. So our older neighborhoods surrounding downtown were built before our community adopted a zoning code in 1975, and they feature a wide range of lot dimensions. So under the proposed standards, more properties in these neighborhoods meet the zoning requirements. You will see in that comparison chart that I pointed out that the three proposals this evening are mostly in agreement on the district's lot standards. So right now I'm going to hand off to John so he can share the central residential district proposal, but I am happy to take questions later in the evening. Thank you.
My name is John Sampin, and I live at 131 North Maple. I'm the vice chair for the Historic Preservation Commission, but today I'm representing Save Our BG Neighborhoods. The Central Residential District, or CRD, was created by a grassroots group of BG citizens. We came together last fall to review measures in the zoning code update created by Zone Co. Company of Cincinnati. While our core group consists of about 30 local residents, we circulated a petition and gathered signatures from over 600 people in all 4 wards of the city who support our perspective. This includes 28 downtown business owners and their employees, as well as homeowners, rental property owners, tenants who live and rent apartments and houses, and several former members of BG City Council. We ask today that our proposal of a central residential district, or CRD, replace portions of the proposed pedestrian residential district, or PR, as defined in the city's draft of the new zoning code. We believe it is in the interest of the whole community to preserve and protect the central residential neighborhoods, which comprise the oldest housing districts of Bowling Green. In particular, our proposal addresses these major issues. We ask that the downtown businesses be supported and that no new businesses be established in the central residential neighborhoods. We ask that no additional multi-unit dwellings or accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, be approved in the CR district. We ask, number 3, that lot coverage be kept at 60%. Thus discouraging greater density and preserving the current level of green space. And 4, we ask for the protection and preservation of our current historic buildings and neighborhoods. The neighborhoods surrounding the central business district are historic, with primarily single-family homes dating from the late 1800s through the 1950s. The variety of architecture and lot sizes make this district interesting and attractive. In larger cities, such traditional districts are coveted, and when the homes are well maintained, they enhance the value of housing throughout the city. Until a street or neighborhood is listed by our local Historic Preservation Commission, and currently we have only 1 home so listed, an individual historic property on any block may be altered to suit the purpose of an investor wanting to convert a single-family home into a 2-unit dwelling. Indeed, over the years, many homes have been altered, in some cases harming their historic character. This is one of the reasons that the proportion of rentals to owners occupied homes has grown to nearly 65% over the last several decades. We have no objection to the presence of well-maintained rental properties in these neighborhoods, but these properties are not regulated and many are not well maintained. The 104 city blocks designated by ZoneCo as PR include several neighborhood businesses. We have no objection to these long-established enterprises, and we expect them to be grandfathered under any zoning update. However, as originally proposed, the PR would allow homes to be repurposed for commercial use, bringing congestion, noise, litter, light pollution, and other associated woes to the residential streets of these neighborhoods. With numerous vacant storefronts in the central business district, and with the future creation of a new gateway district featuring commercial space in the areas between Manville and Enterprise, why do we need more commercial space in the central residential district? We have not seen any rationale or data to support this concept. We are not against business development, but it makes economic and environmental sense to use currently vacant spaces rather than to insert businesses into the neighborhoods. In ZoneCo's proposal, any existing home in the PR could be divided into a 2-unit dwelling or duplex. As we understand it, this would also permit existing homes, historic or not, to be removed and replaced by 2-unit dwellings. In a city that is already crowded with non-conforming duplexes, triplexes, and multi-unit buildings, it doesn't make sense to create more 2-unit dwellings out of single-family homes. Also, the proposed PR district uses the term walkability, stating that increasing commercial use will encourage more walking and less driving. But downtown business owners have said that they need a citywide customer base and cannot survive on foot traffic alone. Moreover, the greater part of this district is already rated most walkable on the National Walkability Index maintained by the United States EPA. In other words, this Bowling Green district is among the most walkable neighborhoods in America. People here are accustomed to walking to downtown stores and restaurants, to the post office, library, farmers market, city park, and local special events. By keeping lot coverage at the currently allowed 60%, our proposal seeks to preserve green space such as trees, gardens, and yards in an area that already one of the most densely populated housing districts in the town. In contrast, the PR would allow lot coverage to increase to 80%. Adding infill structures behind existing single lots will reduce the green space that enhances quality of life and provides abundant carbon sequestration. We have a couple pictures, if you can see them from a distance. This is 80% coverage with all the green space covered up by parking lots. For these reasons, we continue to advocate for the preservation of Bowling Green's oldest residential neighborhoods. We urge council members to adopt our CRD proposal. On behalf of Save Our BG Neighborhoods, I thank the citizens who have shared concerns, the people attending here tonight at this forum, and our city government for their efforts and patience in addressing these challenging issues. Thank you.
Okay, Rachel already covered a lot of the highlights, so forgive me for any duplicative information. The third proposal you have in front of you has 2 parts. The first is a revised pedestrian residential district. This district includes a series of changes that are being proposed in response to concerns some have shared about permitting commercial uses in the areas surrounding our downtown. The second is a proposal for a new zone, which will address areas of commercial and manufacturing that already exist throughout this area today. I will briefly discuss each aspect in turn. First, the revised pedestrian residential zone. This proposal would remove nearly all commercial uses from the pedestrian residential district altogether. Corner stores, bars, microbreweries, boarding houses, and retail sales would all be prohibited. Several other uses would be moved from permitted to conditional. Those uses include barber, beauty, spa, campus ministries, daycare centers, and funeral homes. In those cases, the planning director would be required to consider a number of factors related to the impact the business could have on neighbors and establish additional conditions that would eliminate those negative impacts. Examples of conditions the planning director could consider and would be required to consider in order to mitigate those concerns would be limiting hours of operation, increasing setback requirements, limiting height, and establishing additional parking requirements. The next part of the proposal is for the creation of a new zone. Rather than permitting commercial uses in residential areas as initially proposed under the pedestrian residential zone, this new zone would instead permit residential uses in areas of manufacturing and commercial that currently exist. Currently, these areas, which have existed for many decades throughout our entire city, permit uses that I do not consider to be neighborhood scale. You can see these areas, Rachel alluded in the pink. Examples of uses that are currently permitted today include hotels, which are permitted on parts of North Grove, household appliance manufacturing, which is currently permitted on North Maple, bars and taverns, which are currently permitted on North Summit, and mobile home parks, which are currently permitted on South Maple. Each of these uses is currently permitted along Pearl Street at various points. Until now, the only solution to this issue that's been proposed for these areas is to simply rezone these parcels, again in pink on the map up there, as commercial. That would be the same commercial zoning that will be in place at Walmart and Woodland Mall. Again, not something that I would consider appropriate in a neighborhood setting. What I or we are proposing instead is a zone that includes a more limited and refined list of permitted businesses, allows residential uses under limited conditions, and includes architectural design standards that will help ensure that every new development or substantial redevelopment of any kind in these existing commercial or manufacturing areas not only doesn't detract from, but adds value to and strengthens the existing character of the surrounding area. In closing, this proposal represents a far more incremental, measured approach than anything that has been proposed thus far. That includes the initial proposal for the pedestrian residential. It addresses many concerns we've heard from some residents, balances the concerns and interests of a number of key stakeholders, and provides an important mixed-use tool for the city, which can be closely monitored, amended, and to the extent warranted, necessary, gradually expand as our city continues to grow and evolve over the coming decades.
Okay. Okay, guys, I think we're gonna start small group discussion. We're on the clock. I think Lori said 15 minutes. All right.
15 minutes at the table?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, folks, if I could have your attention, please. Hate to cut off conversation, but in the interest of time, we do need to keep things moving along. So we are going to move on to the part where we're going to have each table share a synopsis of what you discussed at your table. I do want to remind you again about index cards. So if you would please write down your questions on index cards at the end of the report out, we will collect those cards for the final part of our session. All right, so we will go ahead and start with table number 1, if we could please. We are gonna, is that okay, Nick? Oh, did you're the reporter, huh? Couldn't get somebody else to do it. Come on up to the microphone and we'll just go in order from here, please.
The buck stops here,
All
right?
right,
Yeah.
thanks, Nick.
Okay, so we were table 1 right over here. We had a very lively discussion, very strong discussion, and I'm just glad that so many people came and showed up to this. I think it really goes to show how important this is to our community. So there was a little bit of confusion between the difference between what's going on in the updated PR zone and the commercial zone, but I think we came to an understanding there. But there's still a strong concern in the PR zone that what's going to happen, even if you remove all the commercial use, is that landlords are going to come in, buy up old homes, and turn them into duplexes. And that is certainly not what they envision as the vision for that neighborhood. There was an idea of kind of pulling in the reins and really looking at this, looking at what other cities have proposed who are around our size, around our demographic, and kind of what they have done, what has worked. So looking into that. And, I think that there is a strong concern, and rightly so, that they want to ensure the historic look and the historic preservation of the central residential district. And I can understand the fears that, based off of the development that we've seen already in this area and based off of the individuals who have bought homes and turned them into kind of eyesores already, that is what's going to occur. And there also wants to be more really looking into rental properties and inspection of rental properties. So I know that's not technically covered in this zoning, but I certainly think that that's something that city council should dig our teeth into even more once this folds. So that was table 1. Is there anything else that I missed that you all wanted to talk about? Yeah, pull the reins in, give it a little time. All right, thank you.
I'm Joel Odoricio, City Council member for Ward 2. I would like to share that our table also had a wide diversity of opinions. I don't feel like we came to a consensus as a table. And rather than reiterate what Nick has shared, I will read some of the questions that we developed. So there was, in fact, and continues to be a strong interest in reducing the amount of single family homes that are turned into duplexes or split up into rental units. So a question that we developed: how can we deter further deterioration of older neighborhoods with increase in lot coverage and approval of conservation of single family homes? Basically, how do we restrict the deterioration of neighborhoods by turning them into rental units? All right. We don't understand the rationale for making the PR changes. I don't want these businesses in my neighborhood. So, and then another opinion at our table is, why pick and choose? All the neighborhoods should be equal. I will share my personal opinion on that. I think we do need to identify the areas that where businesses should grow and develop, and other areas where that should be residential, and then perhaps other areas of the city which are more densely residential, like some of the larger apartment complexes that are being developed. Um, I personally feel that having some of these higher density, high quality housing developments will reduce the financial incentive to turn our historic homes into rental units. So I think that is part of the impetus of why we are doing these zoning changes. Um, and with that, I will pass it to table 3.
Okay, so we started off with a bit of discussion of enforcement of codes. So we're talking about coding, but some of the things that are left out of the codes that address more things like aesthetics or the way the property looks, how much greenery or landscaping might be also involved, and those are things that would be secondary to establishing the zoning code. We had a lot of discussion about the 80% lot coverage with a couple of pros and cons. Some people thought that this would be helpful for them because they have a small home now, and if they chose to have children, they would maybe need some more space, and that this would give them the opportunity to increase the size of their home without having to move from their neighborhood. Also, the other thing is to maybe put some place for their elderly parents. We had a lot of opposition to that discussion that came up because of the fact that 80% of the lot coverage then puts even more impervious material, concrete housing that keeps rainwater from passing into the ground, infiltrating into the ground as it properly should on the ground on which it falls, and could increase flooding. A lot of the sewer systems here are still being used, they're combined sewer and stormwater, which is then problematic because of the flooding that can result. So stormwater became an issue. There was some discussion about large homes, these duplexes that are often built on pieces of property on just regular 60-foot wide lot, become quite large. And so you're looking out your own house at somebody's walls. The trees, which we all enjoy here in Bowling Green, this is one of the really most truly beautiful things. You don't see this in so many communities across the United States, where I've lived in many. You don't see the kinds of ancient old trees in historic neighborhoods like you do here, and people are would be really upset about that. So in general, we had discussions about the aesthetics, the appearance. It was brought up that the picture that Ms. Kepke showed us of the 80% lot coverage with all of the landscaping stripped away in a building and nothing but concrete. And we see a lot of that in Bowling Green because of the rental properties that are just maximizing the use of the land for their rental businesses. But then in counter to that, we also have an individual who does have homes that he rents, and he maintains them differently, and feels that his renters are quite happy and content with their property management. So I think that was about the extent of our summary. Okay.
Group 4, a lively group with firm opinions. Different than Joel's group. Joel said there was a wide diversity of opinion. This group did not have a wide diversity of opinion. Pretty much two things. One, very much against the PR district. And as a small one part of the subset related to that is concern about the degradation and depletion of single-family housing. So that's pretty much a summary of the discussion, although there were very good subpoints made during the discussion as well. I did note that at least one of my colleagues said on a personal note, and I really would like to take a personal note for the next 15 minutes. So here, no, I'm just kidding. I will prevent myself from doing that. And I do hope that this format ends up having us go in the direction we need to go in terms of working out details. I think we knew there was already a bit of opposition to the currently proposed PR district, and I'm hoping that we can go beyond that and learn something new to help steer us towards the next step in this process. But I did want to thank you all for showing up and giving us the benefit of your perspectives.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? No? How about now? Good? Okay. So table 5. We had some more general questions, I think. Some people are worried about the effect of the zoning change on their own property. For example, if you live in a house and you have some property that you bought next to your house that is part of your living arrangement now, how would that be impacted in the future if the zoning changes to allow people to make lots a lot smaller? Or what would people be allowed to do what would people be allowed to do on their own property when these zoning changes occur, based on the fact that the city would like for lot sizes to be a little bit smaller? That was a question that we talked about for quite a bit. Some people, Greg said that he appreciates a balance, and I think that's what we kind of all want in the district, of single-family homes with multifamily homes, although in my opinion, we have quite a few, at least in the central residential district, we have quite a few of, I don't know if you want to call them multifamily, we just have a lot of rentals. But can see the value in allowing that maybe we could build some better single-family homes and get rid of some of those rentals. I don't know how that would occur, but that was discussed. And that one of the things he mentioned was the building, I don't know, I think it used to be a school, or maybe it was a mental health hospital or something, that big building on Wooster out near Haskins, that could maybe become condos or something. That might be a good use of that property if the zoning changes occur, that it would allow something like that to occur in the neighborhood. There were still worries about willy-nilly building of commercial and rental buildings inside the neighborhood, and the ability to maintain and grow single-family homes in the district, and also to maintain green space. And that's basically what we talked about. Is that it? Everything? That's it.
Hi, everybody. We're from Group 6. I just want to state in the first place that I think there's still a lot of confusion. I think a lot of us still feel really confused about even the way the three, we had the yellow sheet and the green sheet, which was the CR, which was the PR, which was the revised PR. So maybe it's just me, but I think there's still a lot of confusion. Our group felt, I just made a few hurried notes. One group member thought improving existing neighborhoods, investing money and energy there was kind of the way to go, rather than moving businesses or moving neighborhoods. there's a problem with enforcement of standards. I think we all can agree with that, that it would be really wonderful if landlords would step up and just maintain their properties. A lot of us began in Bowling Green, myself and a lot of other people, as renters. We were able to find affordable rentals, rental houses even. In my case, my husband and I sort of rented until we were able to buy the house. I mean, I wonder if that's an option for more people. Kind of a system failure, failure to enforce codes. We really doubt whether increasing density. We're worried about increased density. I feel like we have enough density in our neighborhoods in the central residential district right now. Things are pretty dense. I don't know why we are the ones who have to provide all the why density is a good thing and why we are the neighborhood that has to provide all the rentals. We have a lot of rentals. Most of them are not very well maintained. I'm not sure that, and a lot of our group agreed with this too. I think that whether, for example, taking an existing single family home, splitting it up into a duplex or a triplex or whatever, whether that's really going to create more affordable housing. Aren't landlords going to, not to be cynical, but aren't landlords going to charge as much as they can? I'm having trouble reading my own writing here. It seems like, maintaining better rentals might be a better sort of leg up for affordability. People could rent until they're available, until they're capable of owning. But then we need to have affordable single family homes. Maybe we need to build new single family homes. I'm not sure. Allowing accessory dwelling units will be creating apartments in backyards, one of our members said. Okay, and I think Marilyn has some things she wants to add.
In a way, I'm just going to emphasize a few things. There was confusion at our table too. It took a while to figure out how to read the map, how to read the handouts, what color was what color. Okay, so the big question again, why are we doing this? And we had Jeff Dennis at our table. And we know that one of the reasons is we have to fix the old codes. We know they're from 1975. Okay, that's one reason. And then Jeff said, we're doing it because we want to be sustainable. Good reason. And then he said, we're doing it because we want improvement. Another good reason. And then a fourth reason he added was supply and demand. And meaning we need to supply more affordable houses because there's such a demand for it. Okay, and we don't quite agree with this. We think maybe what we have should be improved upon instead of just building new things. New shiny objects are fun, but they kind of go away quickly too. So the bottom line for us, and you already mentioned this, is enforcement and oversight. Without enforcement and oversight, none of this is going to happen. I don't care what kind of zones you create. If you don't have the proper oversight by the city or by whomever is responsible for those things, all these lovely things won't mean anything.
Can I start with the ground vision? Hello, we're table 7. We had a very interesting discussion, and we spent a little time also reflecting on why we're doing all this, why this new zone has been proposed, what it is supposed to accomplish at the end, and what is a grander sort of vision for the city down the road 30 or 40 years from now. Is it simply to, are we doing this new zoning update in order to update a very old zoning code simply, or because we want Bowling Green to have a certain character that is beneficial to its citizens for many years to come. And so we talked about that. We also talked about a more narrow issue, which is to bring a new zone to conform, or rather, to accommodate the reality of neighborhoods. There are a lot of non-conforming properties, and somehow they need to be made to conform to something that is codified, and the code can do that. All right. So, but the grander vision for our city is to have happy citizens who will own homes, who will send their children to good schools in Bowling Green, and will stay here. We also talked about yeah, I think I'm gonna have Penny talk about the issue of setbacks and coverage, lot coverage.
Our group covered a lot of subjects that have already been mentioned, and we came up with a lot of questions more than answers. But one topic was the lot size, and my question was about the 80% and how if you have a 20% front setback and a 20% back, that the mathematics just don't add up for your minimum 100-foot lot, that you only have 60 left. Well, I'm told, I didn't realize this, but I'm told that the coverage, actually the lot setbacks take precedence over that lot coverage. So I still am kind of stirring that in my brain. And what I'm thinking is that means, for example, if you have the minimal lot size, 100-foot deep, then the maximum lot coverage is 60 foot on a minimum lot size. So city council members, am I understanding that?
Just so that everybody can hear this response, that is a 20-foot setback, and that does not include, when we're talking about coverage, it includes the driveway. So even though the house has to be set back 20 foot, the driveway begins at the street. So you could have coverage, including a sidewalk or a walkway or an accessibility ramp that would be a part of your lot coverage without actually getting closer than 20 feet to the street.
More confused, I'm afraid, Joel.
So if your lot is 100-foot long, you have to set your house back 20 feet from the front, but your driveway starts at the street. So the building of the house is where the setbacks.
Is not part of lot coverage? Or
Driveway
part?
is part of lot coverage.
Okay.
So that can start right at the street and move up towards your house. And if you have a separated garage, that also is lot coverage. And if you have a walkway that goes to your door, that also is lot coverage.
The only other thing that I think our group talked about just a little bit was mixed use. We felt like that is a, we see it as a problem in, well, some of us, I'm not sure our whole table agreed, but Vasiliki and I have been involved in the group that actually sees that as a problem in the proposed PR. And we realize that there is a trend around the country. I think it's more often in a metropolitan area where maybe there's a downtown that's truly been abandoned, or a neighborhood that's been abandoned. And maybe this kind of a approach is just what that area needs to bring back both residents and business. I don't think we really have that, or even pockets of that are significant in our town. But we talked a little bit about mixed use. Why is it proposed in the PR area, but not really so much in other areas? That there's R1, R2, which is largely residential and is going to stay residential. And then there's some areas that have commercial or industrial are going to stay that way. Right now we're in the park conservation. I forget the name of our area we're physically in right now, but it's going to stay that way. Well, we want it to. We don't want houses or businesses right in the middle of our city park, or institutions are going to stay. Agricultural area is going to stay the way it is. So there's lots and lots of parts of the code that are not seeing significant changes. Some changes, but not significant. But I think the PR has the lion's share of, we are largely residential now. We are rentals, we are homes, we are some apartments. The code has been kind of not handling or not enforced in terms of how buildings have become multi-unit. So there are a lot. We have a pretty substantial density, but we're largely a residential area, largely an area of homes. And the walkability part means that we're near downtown. In fact, that the rating that was read to us earlier, that we are rated very highly in a review across the country, that we are very walkable. So we don't really have to have businesses next door to make us more walkable. I think that kind of covers what we're talking.
All right, thank you so very much. I'm going to ask that if you've been writing questions on those index cards, that you give them to the council member who's at your table. And council members, if you'll collect those and bring them over to the staff at the staff table, please. That'll give us a chance to consolidate those while the rest of the group takes a 10-minute break. So it's 7:15. We'd ask that we reconvene at 7:25. Here, restrooms are down the hall and to the right. Thank you. All right, so staff is still working through the cards. Thank you so much for submitting so many questions. Bill? Front? So we've started with a list of questions, some of the themes that we were seeing emerging in the cards, and provided those to council. So Council President, that's okay, Jeff, don't worry about that. We'll pick it up. Council President Hollenbaugh has some of those questions, and then we will provide you with additional ones, members of council. So President Hollenbaugh, I turn it over to you. Again, just a reminder, council, if you could please speak into your microphones to help with sound in here as well as those watching from other places. Thanks so much.
Okay. We're going to get started on this. There were a lot of questions, a lot of note cards filled out, so thank you for that. And those cards and the questions on them will be made available to all council members. What we're trying to do is compile the questions together, because we have a lot of cards, but we also have a lot of cards that are about the same topic. And so we're not just going to take a card, read it. We'll be here until summer. So what I have is the beginning of the compiled list. They're still working, compiling cards, and they will be bringing more into us as we go. But we're going to start with what we have so far. It seemed on a number of the cards that there was some confusion over this new zone and what exactly this new zone was all about. And I was wondering, Jeff, could you just hit some of the high points?
You got it, Mark. Okay, so there's, I think, maybe the handouts on the table are not entirely clear on this point, but I believe, and Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it is the second column on the green sheet says proposed CR.
It says revised on the green sheet in the second column.
There's two new zones.
Okay, you can listen to me and take notes. I wrote it, so I'll just go. So on the map at your table, I think everybody's got a map. They should all be the same maps. There are currently areas which are pink located throughout what many are referring to as the donut, the pedestrian residential zone. This spot zoning exists today, and it is currently M1 light manufacturing and B2 limited business. Uses permitted in these areas include everything from airports to, let me read my, airports, hotels, household appliance manufacturing, bars and taverns, mobile home parks, lumber yards. That's permitted today, currently. Right across the street over here, on the corner of Conneaut and North Maple, you could build a hotel if you wanted to. That's what it's currently zoned for. That's a problem. That's not a neighborhood scale use. Up until this proposal, nobody has suggested anything that would address these zones that exist today and would be converted or consolidated into our commercial zone under the zoning proposal. So what the new zone would do is eliminate many of these businesses, which I don't consider to be neighborhood scale. I think Rachel agrees. She won most of those debates. So actually Rachel thinks they are not neighborhood scale. It eliminates some uses, your gas stations, your body shops, manufacturing facilities. You can't build a factory on South Maple under this proposal, which I think is a pretty good idea. To be clear, I think not being able to build a factory on South Maple is a good idea. So the uses, I believe, are on the yellow sheet. New zone to be named. Again, lot coverage standards are similar to everything that is being proposed on here. There are some differences, lot coverage being a big one. In terms of the uses, what we did is actually down zone these areas from what is currently permitted, again, to more neighborhood scale businesses. And you can see those uses all listed there. They really run the gambit. Probably the most notable thing about this new zone, though, is that in these areas of commercial and manufacturing, we are proposing to introduce residential. So in these areas currently that are scattered throughout all of these residential neighborhoods, you cannot build residential uses in those areas. It can only be manufacturing, and again, I don't know if those uses are in front of you, but so that, in a nutshell, is the proposal.
Mr. President, may I add a little bit to that?
Sure, a little bit.
Yeah, the way that I'm understanding the massive amount of work that Jeff and Rachel put into this is you've got several options. One is have these areas that are embedded within residential be part of whatever we come up with ultimately, PR, CR, whatever it ends up being, in which case there'll be a lot of non-conforming uses. That would be like option A. Option B would be as it's currently written for the proposal, it would be going into commercial. And Jeff brought up very, very correctly that that would mean that there's a lot of uses that just simply don't fit those areas that are already commercial that are embedded within residential. So option B is keep it the way the proposed code has. Option C is to take a look at it as a special case where you've got these that are already basically commercial and industrial next to residences and treat them differently. Give them their own zone to be named and go through and say, well, this would be appropriate, this would be permitted, this shouldn't be permitted, and this would be conditional. And that's what the intent of the new zone is, to tailor make, to fit the situation where you're right next to a residence on what would seem to fit there and not fit there. And a good example of taking it into consideration is the side yard setback. If there is a business next to this, it's proposed to be 0. But if there's a residence next to it, then it's 10 foot. So the intent, and please, Jeff, to correct me if I'm wrong, the intent is to say, all right, this is a special case, and we all can think of examples, and let's take into consideration it's next to residential, and then add a component that, okay, it's next to residential, maybe ultimately it would be a residential use. So this would be the option C, which is don't make it completely residential with a lot of non-conforming uses. Don't make it the generic type of industrial or commercial. Tailor make it to the new zone. Did that?
Yeah, I think another benefit that neither of us touched on is that while these areas are scattered throughout the entire city, this would be a more incremental approach to the mixed use concept that we have spent so much time talking about. So whatever we adopt is going to be a living, breathing document that can get studied, amended, either expanded or eliminated. And one of the benefits of this proposal is that it's going to be in a much more limited area, which is going to make that a lot easier.
Okay, some of the questions addressed a fear that if new businesses were to be allowed in this area, this residential area around the downtown, that it might take away from downtown businesses. Does anyone want to speak to that issue?
Sure, I would. Our entire community benefits from having a strong ecosystem of locally owned businesses. That includes your huge, brand new breweries downtown. That also includes your artisan manufacturing in the first floor of your home, right? We all benefit when we make it easier for somebody to start and run a small business in this community. So yes, there is a lot here that will make that easier. I don't think people investing in this city is a bad thing.
I would like to speak to that also. I think this is an explicit acknowledgement of the businesses that are already in our neighborhoods. At my table, I noted that there is a salon right on the corner. As I drove to the park, I drove past dry cleaners. When I visit my lawyer, he is on 6th Street, right down the street from me. So we have these businesses in our community right now. We want to make sure that the businesses that are allowed to be in the communities fit the nature of the communities. So this new proposed district that includes the pink areas on the map will make sure that any businesses that move in align with the needs of the neighborhood. We already have businesses all through our neighborhoods.
And there were some concerns about businesses within neighborhoods causing light pollution that would disrupt the quality of life of people living in those residential neighborhoods. I don't know, Heather, you have anything to say on that?
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. I'm not on council, obviously. My name's Heather Saylor. I'm in the planning department as a planning director. And so I'm here to provide information and answer any questions in regards to the current zoning code and the proposed zoning code that you have in front of you. So there are actually a lot of new features in the new zoning code that's proposed that really haven't been discussed. I would say one of those is a photometric plan, a requirement there that regulates lighting. This is about, I think, 2 pages of information that is totally new to the city. We only have a glare requirement right now that is in the building code. So I think that's something that would impact that question definitely. Again, just requiring that photometric plan as part of any development. So I hope that kind of helps answer that question. And there's a lot of other new things too I could get to if that question comes up.
This one is possibly more of a legal question. There were a number of people that were interested in knowing if there is some way, and I'll preface this by saying legally, that we can limit rental properties. Anyone?
Can I go again?
You can go as much as you want. You have a law degree, I don't.
I think it's important to keep in mind when we talk about renting or eliminating rental properties, that what you are saying is we are going to ban people from these areas who cannot afford to own a home. Frankly, you're just banning the rental property from the street, not the renter. The thing with rental properties is that they tend to be full of renters. So I can understand that that's not what you mean, and I think genuinely you do not mean that, but that's what you're saying.
So I would like to interrupt just a minute because no one's going to hear you on live streaming. But I also want to add that Bowling Green is not a unique 60-40, 65, whatever mix. This is a college town, and that is totally why. You can go look at Kent, you can look at Oxford, you can look at Athens. Athens is much higher, but it's very similar in the percentage rates. I'm not arguing, I'm just, again, giving you facts that this is a typical college town mix. There definitely are issues with rentals, but there's also issues with owner-occupied properties that we get complaints on. So again, I'm just sharing that as a college town, that is a unique mix that happens.
Well, I mean, I don't know if either of those exactly address the simple question of, can we limit the number of rental properties? And I know that that would be a very difficult thing to do legally since people have property rights. But you like to come to the podium and share some information with us? Perhaps you know more about this than I do.
My name's Dave Neuendorf. I'm not an attorney. First thing, though, you don't have to explicitly tell somebody that it's not a rental property. You could do things like limit the number of parking spaces you can have in a unit, which is legal. And by that, discourage somebody from putting 15 cars on a lot or putting too many units in a building. And that's something you can do. There are things you can do in the code that are perfectly legal that you might say deny people their rights, but you don't have a right to shine a light in your neighbor's house all night, and you don't have a right to make loud noises at 2 o'clock in the morning. So I think the issue really is a balance of rights, and to discourage rental properties. You can get people started. We talked about somebody over there that started in a rental property and ended up buying the house, which is the goal. But rental properties are not maintained the same level of degree because they're income producing properties, and it's a short-term rental usually and a short-term ownership, and they're turned over all the time. I've heard stories of students' parents who bought houses here in BG for 4 years and then abandoned the house at the end of it. Now, you'll have to tell me if those are true stories or not. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's actually a great point, and we are taking steps to limit the negative externalities that would come with, you mentioned limiting parking, for example. I'm not gonna recite it out of memory, but we are limiting the size of parking pads, correct? So there are several steps that are being taken, several factors in this code that'll do just that. And I think you're absolutely right. There are ways we can address the negative externalities without segregating certain people from our neighborhoods.
Okay. There were some questions on the issue of defining bed and breakfast, but not defining other short-term rentals in the code. Does anyone want to speak to why one is defined and the other is not? Do we define both?
I can answer that. The current code deals with them as bed and breakfast if it's 14 days or less of a stay consecutively. The current code was modeled after that, with bed and breakfast being basically like a short-term rental. However, the conditions still apply, but the owner occupancy still applies to that, and there's other conditions. So that's how they were treated. The terminology short-term rentals didn't come up really during, I think, the writing of this at all. They were really labeled as bed and breakfast. Again, and then that fine line, if it's longer than that, you're just renting your house, whether that's 9 months, a year. So there really wasn't that line drawn. I know that's came up before at council meetings that people are interested in that. And, obviously that's something that can be dealt with. A lot of the time though, it's under the business licensing or business regulations of an ordinance. But obviously it's up to council if they want to do anything with that.
I would like to speak to this briefly. Last year, as a city council, we imposed rental registration requirements. We do have a legal opinion from our city attorney that in fact these rental registration requirements do apply to short-term rentals, including VRBO and other short-term rental programs. So although it's not currently in zoning, I'm interested in making sure that we separate that out because it is a long-term rental is different than a day-to-day or a one-week rental that you can get on VRBO. So we do have some regulations that cover it. We don't have them in zoning. I would like to take that up and have that discussion after we finish the zoning discussion, though.
There were questions about the term density and particularly the notion of duplexes and why do we want duplexes in the pedestrian residential area?
I can talk specifically about two-unit dwellings and how there's been a huge gap in our code. Our current code basically jumps from single-family, R1 and R2 zoning, to R3, moderate density and high density. So there really is no middle zoning classification that allows some different types of housing units. Almost 70% of our city is zoned single-family. That is not a balance of housing types, and it's something nationally that's a big issue right now. Nationally, we're short about 7 million housing units. Rental owner occupied, whatever you want to call it, we're short 7 million. So in my world of planning, I watch webinars weekly, almost daily, about the housing shortage and how zoning codes are a barrier to creating more housing types. Not everybody can afford a house. Not everybody wants to live in a house. We all know in this room, if you own a house, it costs a lot of money, right? Homeowners tend to have a little more money. They tend to be white. I'm just putting the information out there that we're trying to build balance in our code. Whether it goes in the PR or not, I'm not saying that. I'm just telling you nationally this is an issue and people are trying to work, local jurisdictions are trying to work on their codes to make more balance. I would also add that there's even states eliminating single family zoning because they see the barriers it's creating. Every day, read the headlines. I can share articles. There's a lot of information about zoning and equity. And again, a big part of that is housing people. Not whether it's single family, multifamily, duplex, it's housing people. So I just want to get that out there just because this is the field I'm in. And again, it's a national issue that I'm happy to share research and articles on. And again, I'm not talking about the PR, I'm just talking about in general, we had a gap in our code, not allowing duplexes. So, for example, Larch Landing, that had to be built by variances, plain and simple. So there should be something that we're able to provide to somebody to be able to do a different kind of housing type.
Heather, isn't it true that we also have a gap in, the code says one thing, but we have something different. So the code might limit those duplexes, but we have them plentiful. We have 70% of the large number, 260 or whatever it is, I'm not certain, but there's a lot of them and most of them are in the proposed PR. Isn't that true?
I would not say that's true. If you're talking about the occupancy list or not legal non-conforming list, that's not just all listing duplexes. That's about numbers of bedrooms, numbers of unrelated. It's about a house being in commercial. It's much more broader than just two-family dwellings.
Okay, but I understand what you're saying, that they might be a varied bunch. But in our town, we have a high percentage of rentals. And how high do we want to go? Because what we know is happening is that before younger folks can buy a moderate house, it is scooped up to become yet another rental. So what percentage? We know the rate is getting higher. How high do we want to go?
Okay, so I will preface that by I'm not a legislator. I am just wanting people to understand that not everybody wants to buy a house or can. My disabled son cannot buy a house. My disabled mother cannot buy a house. They need providers. They need people to care for them. We have people that are lower income. We have people that are seniors that can't buy a house. So I just want, again, I'm opening up that there's other people that need housing.
I do understand that.
Well,
but
we
there are-
appreciate your comments, but
Hey, just
we-
one more, then I'll leave. There are many multiple small towns around us, including Perrysburg, which isn't so small, that have 2 or 3% rentals. I just wanted to say that. And Ann Arbor, a large city and a large college, has only low 50%.
Sure, but we are not really comparable to those communities. And Heather mentioned several. You can also add East Lansing into that. I mean, this is the Midwestern college town. This is what it looks like. Come up right on ahead.
Okay, no more public comment. No more public comment. We're answering questions right now. We're going to be here till the crack of doom if people just randomly walk up and decide to share their thoughts with us. Okay. So, there's some questions here with regard to who makes decisions on conditional uses? Rachel, do you want to talk about who makes decisions when it comes to conditional uses?
Or Heather could tell us this.
Oh, no,
So
Heather seems to aggravate people.
150 point, no, that's not true. 150.98 in the new code is controls conditional use applications. So if there's a conditional use application that comes in, planning director has to take it through 5 or so factors, and then has the ability, if those factors aren't met, to add conditions. So those are the buffers and the noise restrictions, parking requirements, et cetera, et cetera. So I would point you there. 150.98 lays out very clearly the planning director process for conditional use approvals. Heather, anything to add? Nope. Okay.
Okay, so there were several questions about, and I don't know if this was so much a question as a comment. If this proposed PR zoning is such a benefit to the PR district, then why don't we just have that zoning for the entire city? So why do we not just have one zoning district?
We could outlaw single family zoning if that's if that's what we want to do.
Joe.
If we only have one zone for the whole city, it will necessitate, please read the question again.
Well, I'm guessing the notion is if allowing businesses intermixed in neighborhoods is good in the PR area, why isn't it good in all areas? Is that a more accurate? Okay.
I mean, I would be I would be open to having all residential areas be the new proposed residential area. I mean, if that's what we're talking about, I would be happy to do that. I mean,
I want to be clear about what that would mean. We have high density areas. That means large multifamily units. If we have one residential zone that covers everything, that means every residential zone will have high density housing available in that residential area.
not multi.
That's what happens if we only have one residential zone for the whole city.
No, I misstated that. It was more about interspersing businesses within all residential neighborhoods.
Well, I think the new proposed residential zone that Rachel and Jeff have come up with, I mean, I don't see any reason why that we couldn't put that in every single residential zone in the city.
Nick, those are currently existing commercial zones.
No, there's two different, I mean, so I think that's what the confusion is coming from. The proposal put forward, there's an update to the commercial zones, and then there's also an update to the proposed pedestrian residential zone. And I'm saying we could take exactly what is in the proposed pedestrian residential zone, the update that stripped out all the commercial use, and make it every single residential area in the city is now that proposed residential zone.
Including R3?
No, well, I guess keep the R3 where we want large, to have more high density.
But R1 is single family homes only.
Right. Well, I'm saying that we put it there too. Like everyone was saying, why would we stop there?
So we would be then allowing, Nick,
Exactly.
I don't think that's.
No, that's what the people want, right?
Oh, that's not what they want.
That's what the people want. Exactly. I agree. I think it's smart.
Guys, can I just interrupt really quickly? So a big goal of updating our, oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you. A big goal of updating the zoning code. Our 1975 code was to simplify it, right? So we're going from something like 24 zones and districts to around 12. There will be 5 primarily residential zones and districts in the new code. Those all allow for a broader housing spectrum, right? So in R1, ADUs are permitted by right. In R2, duplexes are permitted, and ADUs are permitted conditionally. In the PR district, the proposed PR district, currently duplexes are permitted, and ADUs are conditionally permitted. And then there is a university residential district and then an R3 district, an R3 zone. So every single zone and I'm sorry? Sure. So an ADU stands, acronyms, and an accessory dwelling unit, right? Oh, okay, that's it. All right. So every zone and district, each of the 5 new zones and districts in the new code are going to allow us to get from 70% single family to more of a mix, which was a goal of our planning documents. I realize that the devil's in the details, but every single zone and district is doing some lifting here to allow us to diversify our housing citywide.
So as we move through this next group of questions, topic-wise, I do want to let everyone know we received over 75 questions. Some of the questions weren't so much questions as statements of someone's belief. And so we've done the best we can to consolidate all of these into topics, specific topics related to zoning. And so if you do not hear your exact question tonight, just know that it was in with a group of similar topics related to the things on the list. And that all of the questions, all 75 of the questions, will be made available to council members later once they can be consolidated into a more efficient manner than being on index cards. Okay, so I know at my table that there was a lot of confusion on this lot coverage idea, especially when you have lot dimensions, you have setbacks in the code, and then you talk about an 80% lot coverage. So would someone like to speak to, if you have a small lot and you have setbacks, can you still do 80% lot coverage? And also, if we're doing 80% lot coverage in certain, on certain properties, won't this radically reduce the green space that we have around the city? Want to speak to lot coverage?
May I? I just want to correct how the mathematical equation happens in my office. So when someone's building a new house, for example, or an addition or a driveway, I take the square foot of that footage of that lot. After adding up all of the impervious surfaces, so driveway, patio, garage, building, pool, and we divide that by the square footage of the lot, and that's how we get lot coverage. So I'm hoping that clears up some issues. It's not always that simple, but we do the best we can to get the square footage and then calculate that before, as part of the permit review process. And speaking to the 60 to 80, I can't answer that specifically, besides I know ZoneCo went through a lot of the properties in the proposed PR and found a lot of them do exceed lot coverage. So it made sense to at least try to ask for a greater lot coverage. Again, trying to put more properties in conformance than not in conformance and match what's built on the ground. So that is a little bit of at least what I know.
Anyone else want to talk about lot coverage? I thought Heather just addressed the why 80%.
I said that when the consultant zone code did aerial views of this area, he found that the lot coverage was greater in a lot of them. So he was trying to make it more conforming. So if we already have properties that exceed the lot coverage and they want to add to the house or they want to add to their paving, they want to add to their garage, they'd have to come get a variance. That's how that would work, the zoning board of appeals. So, I mean, that's obviously fine and the process is built in there.
Right, because some of these houses were built before there was a zoning code limiting the amount of lot coverage you could do. So in the past, whether it was 50 years ago, 100 years ago, people may have had a small parcel and built a garage, a house, other things on the property that exceed a 60% lot coverage.
So if you set 80% based on a bunch of non-conforming lots, that's what you're saying, that it's set because of the.
No, that's not why it's set that way. What we're doing is looking at a realistic representation of what exists in this part of the town now. And these aren't
But then
all
you're setting
rental
it-
properties. These are
Oh, I know.
homes that people own.
I understand that. I'm just saying that it sounds to me that what you're saying is that Zone Co looked at a variety of different lots and decided 80% was what people were going for. And that's why you set it at 80%.
And again, the 80% isn't cast in stone. It was not handed down to us from on high. It's just the number that's there right now. Okay. There has been some talk, there were some questions about a property maintenance code. Does anybody want to speak to that matter? I know this is a topic that has been brought up before about an external maintenance code or standard.
I can talk a little bit, Mark, about property maintenance codes in general. Typically,
Okay.
those are standalone ordinances. They can be done in several ways, but the ones I've seen are normally standalone.
Right. I would assume that this would be something that would not be included in a zoning code, but rather something that we would pass later on. So, let's see. There were questions about what the difference is between a duplex, a 2-unit dwelling, and an auxiliary dwelling unit. One want to try to parse out the difference between these three things.
Much difference between a duplex and a 2-unit dwelling?
I would say there's some notable differences. So I owned a 2-unit dwelling, which was a single unit house that was turned into an apartment on the first floor and an apartment on the second floor. That wasn't here, that was in New York. So that's a 2-unit dwelling. A duplex would be more like what happened in Peachtree Court across the street, where 2 houses were built adjoined to each other. So they're built initially from the beginning as 2 standalone units.
And then, of course, the auxiliary dwelling unit or ADU, this is sometimes referred to as a granny flat that is maybe above a garage or in the backyard. That's what an ADU is. It's not a multi-unit space.
And Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but those do have to be owner occupied, correct?
Right, you can't build an ADU behind a rental property. You can only build an ADU behind your property. There are several questions about how will ADUs be regulated? Are ADUs allowed in other parts of the city? So is anyone an expert on auxiliary dwelling units?
Well, I would first point everybody, if you have it on your electronic device or a copy at home, page 51 is where all the conditions are laid out to be able to have an accessory dwelling unit. So there, again, the owner occupancy you mentioned, it can't exceed 1,200 square feet. There's a height restriction of 25 feet. So there's several things like that laid out.
They are permitted in R1, correct? And conditional in R2?
So if you look at the use table, so that starts on page 43. And the very first alphabetical order is accessory dwelling units. So as of the current, proposed code in front of you, they're permitted in R1, so it would not have any additional conditional use process, but it would still have the conditions listed in the specific use regulations. And then R2 is conditional, and then PR conditional.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
There were several comments related to code enforcement and the degree to which the code currently or in the future will be enforced. Now, code enforcement is an important issue, but we have to have a code to have something to enforce. So, I mean, code enforcement wouldn't be something that would be written into the zoning code. This is a topic that has come up for years and years about enforcement and about getting a response to a complaint and things like that. And that's certainly something that we are going to work on doing a better job on as a city. But it doesn't really relate to the actual zoning code and writing the zoning code, although I do understand the frustration that what good is it to have a zoning code if we don't enforce the code? That makes sense. I understand that. There were questions about parking regulations, prior parking regulations, new parking regulations, and why there has been a change in parking regulations. Anyone want to talk about parking?
I love parking. I can go on about this. So I'll talk a little bit high level about the current code and the proposed code. So based on a lot of comments we've had about our planning documents over the years, people are tired of seeing the seas of asphalt in our community, right? We've already talked about environmentally, how that impacts our community and stormwater, aesthetics, all that. So another issue is the location of parking. So do we like seeing parking lots in front of homes or even commercial? So the new code is much more stringent on the location of parking. So if you look at starting on page 70, you can see, again, we talked about this too, a parking pad, the maximum parking pad size is in there. But I like the diagrams on page 70 because they show you clearly, here's where you can't do parking, right? You can't do it right in front of your house. But if you have a garage there, you can do it up to the opening of your garage. And that's in the second visual. So, and then you'll see that it has the parking in the back of homes. So I think that's most helpful to review. Another thing I really like is that we have additional landscaping because we've talked a lot about aesthetics. We virtually have very simple landscaping in our code right now. Basically, if you have a multifamily lot next to anything, it doesn't matter, it has to have a 4-foot fence or live screening. If you look at this, we talk about islands, they talk about trees and shrubbery. So it's just, I think, better with what the community's wanted over the years. We have another great feature of really recognizing pedestrians and bicyclists. So we do have a bike rack parking requirement. I know that sounds really silly, but when you have somebody building a development and we have your community telling you, we want this to be a complete streets community and we want to have our development recognize all features, not just vehicles parking, that this code recognizes that. It talks about, having crosswalks to businesses, how important that is. Again, on private property, this is about private property. And I think it's just, again, has a lot of great features that we hope the community likes, but also it still carries forward some additional screening requirements that we currently have carried on to the new code that we've started. So if you can picture where the new Home 2 Suites is, can you picture the stone piers and the fencing? So that's one thing we added about 5 or 6 years ago to the code to have a consistent look and try to screen parking. And so that same exact code for that buffering is in the new code. So again, there's not all these, changes all over. There's some things that we wanted to keep that are working. I also want to talk a little bit about drive-through facilities. Those are regulated more specifically. We never regulated those where hours of operation, having trash receptacles. It's just much more about site design, which is what our consultant from the other land use plans had told us, that we want more site design. So I hope that's not too in-depth, but again, I thought it was important to highlight parking. And then also parking requirements, I shouldn't gloss over that. So our current code has very high parking calculations required. So you'll see at Meyer all the spots used every day, right? No, we don't. So it basically proposes to get rid of parking requirements, that the city can't tell, Mr. or Mrs. Meyer what you need for your Meyer store. It's Meyer that is able to determine that, but within lot coverage, within setbacks, and within the landscaping and buffering and the plantings. So that's kind of a high level view of the parking.
Yeah, I would say that the,
Yes, it removed parking requirements. And when I say requirements, I mean, we're not telling you what you need or you what you need. So, but yes, it does.
all right, so
Although it was unspoken, I heard a second question. There is no requirement to build X number of lots, but there is a maximum on the amount of lots that are allowed to be placed in these residential zones. So there is a maximum on how many parking spaces can be in next to a house. So there's a top limit. We are not requiring people to build to the top limit. Correct.
okay, so I kind of went through both parts of this list. Is there anything that perhaps a member of council feels I misstated, or maybe didn't attack from the right angle, that they would like to add some information to any of these topics? Maybe at your table, you had this discussion, and so you understand more what it is people were trying to get at than I was able to portray.
Mr. President, if I could revisit the discussion we had about making the commercial uses in PR available to all the districts and zones in the city. I think the motivation for that was if this is going to be imposed on the residences currently in the PR zone, if that's going to be imposed, why not spread the pain? Is it kind of an elitist thing to say, well, you guys have to put up with this, but the other parts of the city don't? So I think that was the motivation, not a suggestion that the PR zone be extended throughout the city. It was more like, why are you picking on us and other parts aren't being addressed? So I don't think that it is in keeping with at least the sense that I've had of the people here that, yeah, we think PR is such a great idea. It should be extended to the rest of the city. I think it was more, why are you just having it here if it's good for the
Maybe it's
goose, gander?
a glass half full, glass half empty.
No, why should we have to drink from that glass? Have everybody drink from that glass.
Yeah, let's have everyone drink from the glass.
Are you applauding that he's kind of hinting that PR should be throughout the city? Or are you applauding that, yeah, we don't want it, why are we being forced to have it?
I think people are applauding they'd like a drinking glass. Okay, so like I said, 70 questions. We tried to hit groups of things covered in these questions. Now, I know that we did not hit every topic that people wanted to hit. So here's what I'll say. It is 20 after 8, and if you had a question that you felt did not fall into one of these categories that is regarding the code, please come up and share that with us. But I'm warning at 8:30, I'm going to call it a night, so.
Mr. President,
Yes.
are we transitioning out of this part of the meeting? And if so, may I ask a question about next steps?
Well, let's let him.
I'll wait for you. I'll wait for you. Okay, so I have a question. I have a question about the use of the word compliance and how it's been bandied about. And in nowhere, even though it was on a card, it doesn't seem to have been covered by anything that's already been spoken to. We're talking about compliance of zoning and other regulations that have not been adhered to. Okay, how does that translate into the new zones? Are they grandfathered in and say, this is okay because they're there? Or, and I also want to know about non-compliance and how it will be dealt with in the future, because you can write the zones, but people weren't compliant about splitting up single-family houses into multifamily houses before, and several of you have admitted that. So I just want to know, are you going to deal with that? Or are you just going to say that's for some other time?
I think the issue of compliance is not quite as clear cut as was presented there. So my home was built in 1857. There was no zoning. So there are certainly uses of my farm that are not permitted under the current R2 zoning. That does not mean that that means I am existing non-compliant. So we didn't have zoning until the 70s. All of these neighborhoods that we're talking about were built in the mid or late 1800s, mid 1900s. So it's likely that many of these uses have predate our current zoning codes. So we are not going to go back and force compliance with new codes. So I think that is one compliance issue. A different type of compliance is about the current regulations. So yeah, my grass can't grow so high. Yes, I have to have siding on my house. We do have code enforcement officers that tour the city, make note of places where homes are not in compliance and issue notifications for those. So we are enforcing the zones as we're able to, or we're enforcing the codes as we are able. We are not restricting pre-existing uses.
Does one of the attorneys want to speak to the notion of, pre-existing, non-conforming, or no real estate attorneys?
I mean, I can add, non-conforming uses are regulated by the Ohio Revised Code. So however our zoning code is designed has to be within those parameters because it's state law. Non-conforming uses, again, legal non-conforming uses, not the word grandfathered. That's an old terminology that we don't want to use. Legal non-conforming means you've used that structure that way since before the zoning code. So once this new code is adopted, there's going to be legal non-conforming uses no matter what. We can't write a zoning code that addresses every 1859 house or every property that was parceled out before the establishment of a zoning code. So there is a process within here. I believe it gives within 3 years that the owner of that non-conforming use will get a zoning permit. And it'll be a one-time permit, and then we put it in their perpetual file in our office, and that's what exists. We have those today also from legal non-conforming uses we have now. So that is something that we'll develop a policy with our new city attorney once this becomes adopted, or unless it's tweaked, obviously, then we would do it at that point. But right now, Ohio is a heavy private property state. I'll just put it blindly to you. It is what it is. So again, this code does reduce the length of non-conforming use. I think right now we have 12 months. So if you voluntarily discontinue your non-conforming use for 12 months, then it has to conform. The new code proposes 6 months. So that is a pretty big reduction than what it currently is. And I should add too, there's not only non-conforming uses, there's also maybe your house is only 3 feet from the setback, then that's a legal non-conforming structure. So that's another topic.
Does someone else have a question that they don't feel was addressed in the conversation that they would like to share? Okay.
I'll go ahead. I
Go
think
ahead.
another issue related to legal nonconforming status is what that is going to mean for a homeowner, property owner, I guess I should say, when it comes to purchasing insurance, right? I mean, there are other effects other than just having to apply for a zoning certificate. We all received a rather lengthy email about this from a constituent very early on in this process. That is, I've got 4 pages here that really goes into a lot of detail about what this would mean, particularly if some sort of natural disaster were to strike the city of Bowling Green. And all of a sudden, we've got blocks of homes that all need to be rebuilt exactly as they were within 6 months, or they can't be rebuilt at all. So there are a lot of issues that are going to come up if we create legal non-conforming properties all over the city. A little bit more complicated than paperwork, I think.
Well, I will
incorrect on
also
that?
add, again, I'm going to highlight a change. So our current zoning code basically says if your non-conforming use or structure was damaged by an act of nature, fire, whatever, it's basically a weird formula. It's the rebuilding cost. It has to be, if it's over 60%, you can't rebuild. If it's under that, you can. So the new code uses, I think, a better equation. So it's gross floor area, and it goes up to 75%. So if it was destroyed by an act of God, 75% or more of that gross floor area, then it can be rebuilt. So again, a much cleaner way to deal with them, I feel like, than the renovation costs, because I could have 10 contractors come to the office and give a homeowner, a wide variety of prices. So this is a cleaner way. So I just wanted to highlight that difference.
I would like to thank you all for coming out tonight and participating in this. And I know sometimes it tends to feel like an adversarial relationship, as if it's us against them. But I can assure you that of the 7 council members up here, there are probably 7 different opinions on the zoning code and what the final zoning code should look like. And we are available to you. Feel free to email us with something if you have a question that you feel needs to be answered. We certainly don't view this as an adversarial relationship. We view it as a collaborative relationship, and we very much appreciate you coming out and missing the basketball game tonight to participate in this with us. So thank you very much. Good night. And council members will hang out for a little bit in case you want to talk to us.